Welcome to Behind the Thin Blue Line, a Whisper in the Shadows podcast. In each city, in every neighbourhood, on every street, they stand tall. Those in blue, guardians of our community, our protectors. But who are they really? Behind the Thin Blue Line is the podcast that takes you behind the badge, beyond the headlines, and into the hearts of those who serve and protect. We're here to break down barriers and to tear down the walls of misunderstanding. We're here to listen to their stories, their triumphs, their fears. Ever wonder what it's like serving undercover? Or what's the real-life impact of policing? Or how they cope with trauma? Listen as we step into the shoes of those who walk the thin blue line. You have heard my true stories of what it's really like to be an undercover cop. I want to give a voice to all those living amongst us, unseen and unnoticed, who have put their life on the line being a police officer. Hopefully to give you, the listener, a glimpse into something you will likely never get to experience. Uncover the complex world of law enforcement and the raw human experiences behind the badge. Join me, Jason Somerville, your host and a former police officer myself, as we navigate through these stories on Behind the Thin Blue Line. Let's go and meet our next guest. Welcome to Behind the Thin Blue Line, a Whisper in the Shadows podcast, where I explore the human side of policing and law enforcement. I hope you're enjoying our conversations with former and current officers, where we delve into the complexity of policing and how it affects the human side of a police officer as a person. I'm Jason Somerville, and I was a Queensland police officer for nearly 14 years, as well as an undercover cop for 2 of those years. You'll have been listening to my stories of my time working undercover through my alter ego, Michael Bates. Well, I've decided it is time we heard from other cops and let them tell their stories. Today, I'm chatting with Garth Kirkwood, who is a former police officer and also a former undercover officer based in Queensland. Good afternoon, Garth. How are you, mate?
Wonderful, Jason. Thanks for having me online.
Mate, thanks for agreeing to join the podcast and agreeing to have a chat about both your general policing and your undercover policing experiences. Now, usually I start this with asking you to give us a brief overview of what you currently do and where you currently do it, if that's okay.
Mate, I left the police many years ago, and now I'm a firefighter these days. And as you probably well know, there's a bit of a rivalry between the police and the fireys and that sort of stuff. And I love my job. It's hopefully we'll talk about it later. But what I wanted to do growing up is that I want to help people, and I get to do that every day at my job.
And sleep most nights and lift heavy weights, is that right?
Well, looking at me, mate, I'm not lifting those heavy weights, but that's the general consensus of what the coppers think of us. Yes.
Yeah, the stereotype.
Yep.
That's right. All right. So going back to, I guess, what you just said there, what did you want to be when you were a kid, and why?
Yeah, like as I said, now I love helping people. And growing up, I didn't have a lot of friends, so helping people was a way for me to connect to people. And the thing is, without the social pressures of having to know what to say and all that sort of stuff. So I loved helping people. I played sport and that sort of stuff and those sort of things. So when I got towards high school and that sort of stuff, I love computers and technology and stuff like that. And so,
Yep.
But I couldn't see a career in that at that time because of back in the 80s, as you know, technology wasn't really.
Well, there was no Apple.
No, well, no, that's exactly right. It's I still remember my first computer, little program I wrote when I was in primary school, but that was that was doing that's another story. But anyway, my mother was a postal manager for Australia Post, and she'd worked for Australia Post for many
Yep.
And she got me a summer job helping sorting mail and that sort of stuff, and which is part of what a postman did. So the thing is, I did that, and I was actually pretty good at it because of the way my brain works, with those patterns and all that sort of stuff. So, and a mate of mine was also a policeman at the time, a very close family friend.
Yep.
He was in mobile patrols, I think, at the time. And you hear some of the stories he was telling you about, and you were around that time, so you know what mobile patrols were doing at that time. So
yeah.
So I thought, oh wow, policing. I was bullied a little bit at school and that sort of stuff, and I was never very confident in that sort of stuff. So I thought, well, how can I get back at the bullies and all that sort of stuff? I thought, imagine the power. But it was more about wanting to help people. And I remember in my application, I actually wrote that saying, I'd love to help people. And the thing was, I got through to the police academy as a cadet back then, and yeah, and if I hadn't gotten that, the guy from the post office offered me a job. So I said, so I'd be wearing a blue uniform at the time, whether it was police or postie. So
I was just about to say, it would have been a blue uniform either way.
that's it.
Um,
Yeah,
uh, in regards to the bullies, because that's
yeah,
something that I suffer from as well, and I make
yeah,
mention of it in one of my
yes.
stories. Did you ever come across anyone that had bullied you when you were a police officer?
Well, there's a funny story, like playing football in the local community and that sort of stuff. You got to know people and that sort of stuff. And I wouldn't call him a bully, this guy a bully, but he was a rep football player, so he had that arrogance and air about him. And I remember
Yep.
I was the group of these football blokes had come to my area to they were going to a concert at the local pub, and I was working that night, and I saw this guy. I saw the guy, so I pulled up, and I was working at the time. I said, "Oh, g'day guys, how you going? Yeah, good." And down this little alleyway, there was a guy taking a leak in the alleyway,
Yep.
and I've just gone, "Boy, what are you doing?" And he's turned around and seen the copper in the cop car. And says, "Oh,"
Yep.
and he's then he's walked out and seen it's me, and everyone got a great laugh of it. All his mates did and that sort of stuff. But afterwards, it was that sort of thing that made me feel good about being a copper, in the sense that he was this person that was arrogant as all hell, but I was able to have a joke with him. But the thing is, and
Yep.
sort of bring him down a few pegs, sort of thing.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's
yeah,
fair enough.
yeah,
Something else you touched on
yep.
was that in your application you wrote that you wanted to
Mm,
help people.
that's right.
Was
Yeah,
that questioned when you went through the interview process? And I'll come to how
yeah,
that worked. But
yeah.
were you questioned about that, or did they make any comment around that?
From memory, you got to admit this is many years ago. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't done the math recently. They did. I do remember.
35, but let's not go there.
Yeah. They did mention. They did say something about it and that sort of stuff, and that they thought it was a great way of wanting to do that, of
Yep.
coming in policing for that. So they actually quite enjoyed that part of it. From what I recall.
So talk to me about the whole process.
Mm,
I've spoken about the process that I went through, and
mm,
interviews and academy and all that sort of
yeah.
stuff. What mine was a bit different because
Yes.
as we were talking about prior to starting,
Mm.
I was part of the first 400 of the new era. Um, so we had a completely different process to those that came before us. So talk through the process from when you applied to actually first day on the job, not on the job, first day at the academy.
Yeah. Well, to get to that first day, obviously there was the written up, there was the application process and stuff like that, because I was
Yep.
applying as what was called the cadet back in those days. So what you could do, you could leave high school and go straight into to the police service. And at the time
Yep.
I applied, it was an 18-month course with a minimum of 12 months living, and that
So
was
did you
with the academy.
leave? Did you leave? Did you finish grade 12, or did you
No, yeah, I did finish
finish
grade
grade
12.
12
Yeah,
and go
yeah, yeah,
through?
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
That was the process they got to. You speak to some of the older boys back in those days, and yeah, they went and did 11 and 12. I think Keith,
Yeah.
mentioned it in his
Keith
interview.
did 11, 12.
That
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So with my cohort though, no, we finished grade 12 and then did the academies thing. So yeah, you did your application. You had to. There was a couple of written tests, and the only one I can
Yep.
really remember is the essay, which is the one where I write about wanting to help people. So,
Yep.
and then they had the interview and so on and so forth, and they asked you like, what do you think your TE score is going to be, and all that sort of stuff, and I said, oh yeah, high sevens, low eights, for those who didn't know, 990 was the top at that stage. I ended up getting like just above average, 735. So yeah, I wasn't a great student, but the thing was, yeah, so that's how I got to the academy, got in there and that sort of stuff, and there was 4 cadet groups of 25 students each,
Yep.
all male. I think we were, yeah, we were all
Okay.
male at that stage. So No females in any of our groups.
So you did 18 months and 12 months was live-in. The first 12 months was live-in?
Well, that was what I applied for.
Right. Okay.
That's what I applied
Fair
for.
enough.
So it actually changed partway through. So not long. I don't remember exactly when it changed over, but they changed it to like a 10-month program because they wanted to get us out by Christmas. And
Because we
then
were starting.
yeah, so they wanted us out by Christmas. So instead of pushing it through, so what they did, they actually used like the probationary course. So instead of having X amount of months for our study, they sort of compressed it up a bit and that sort of thing.
Yep.
So and in the middle of that, there was the floods out at Charleville. So we actually spent, I think it was 1 or 2. I can't remember the exact timing, whether it was 1 or 2 weeks out at Charleville helping clean up for the floods. So
that would have been
Charles
fun.
Charles Towers, I think it was. Yeah, no, I think it was Charles Towers. Sorry, my apologies. They'll start with C. Geography is not my strong point, but Charles Towers it was. Yeah, so we went out and
Country Queensland.
Country Queensland, yeah. So we went out there, and it was pretty. The floods were really bad, and so we went and cleaned the hospitals and all that sort of stuff. And we lived in tents out there. It was funny. They had the prisoners out there too, the very low security ones, and we actually played a touch football game against them for the public and all that sort of stuff, and bring cheer to the town and all that sort of thing. So I got gastroenteritis and got flown home. So that was a great time for me.
You would have been living back at the academy by yourself then, were you?
I did get back there by myself, yeah. But it was only a couple of days left in our trip anyway. But so the thing is, so they sort of shortened our course a bit because they wanted us out by Christmas. There was a couple of us that couldn't go because they hadn't quite reached 18 years old. So it was quite funny. I remember looking at my years later, looking at my graduation photo, and here I am with my cadet hat and the uniform on, and acne all over my face, and I just think, wow,
Well, yeah, and look, I was 21 when I got sworn in, so but I was still young. I look at my photo at that age with me and my dad, and it's like, oh my God, you were such a kid.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So where was your first posting?
Well, I put in for 3 towns and I got none of them. So I ended up at Maryborough. Funnily enough, I knew nothing of the town, not a thing. So
did you want a country posting or did you want a city posting?
Oh no, I had put in for Bundaberg, Redcliffe, and I can't remember my third preference. Yeah, and I ended up at Maryborough. I was a single guy, 18 years old. So fortunately, I think my aunt from up that way knew someone, so I moved in with the bloke and that sort of stuff, and joined the local footy team and those sort of things. But it didn't last very long there. I ended up, as you know, for the first year, you go through the different areas and stuff like that. No, I ended up at Harvey Bay, and that was great. That was a very good learning curve. I worked with a copper there who I run into many years later in my firefighting role, and he's now a senior sergeant. And working with him back then, you thought, no, he would never make a good boss, but he got there. And he's a great bloke. He's a top bloke. Don't get me wrong, but and he's the sort of boss that you would want. But so no, that was a great experience, and then and that's sort of funny enough. That's at Harvey Bay is where I found out about UC work.
So and that leads nicely into my next question, which is, how did you get into UC work? Was it something you wanted to do, or did you just fall into it, or how did that all eventuate?
Well, it's a funny story in the sense that my first job, which I'll get into shortly, but I had no idea what it was. Never heard of it.
Yeah.
Had no concept of what it was, and what the job was is that the one of the local coppers, he'd put a couple of his kids' push bikes into the local charity shop to be sold, and the thing was that the charity shop got knocked off, and the town of Harvey Bay back then was a lot smaller than what it is now.
Oh, it wouldn't have been that
smaller.
big, yeah.
No, it's a lot smaller. So the thing was, so what he did the day we found out, he went around to all the schools to try and look at all the bike racks to try and find bikes, and he found it at one of the local high schools, and there was the two bikes were chained together. So I thought, I was working that day, and I lived great. I lived across the road from work, so that was fantastic. Commute was awesome. So they said to me, go home, get changed in clothes, and then what they want me to do is they want me to stand outside the school. So when the kids come and get the bikes, you sort of go and get the kids, wave us down, and we'll come down and grab them. So, yeah, okay, so that's pretty cool. Awesome. So I went home and put on Garb. It wasn't like this, but it was, yeah.
But you still would have been, 19 or 20 then, wouldn't you?
I was still, I was 19. No, I was still Harvey Bay. That would have been, no, I was still, it would have just turned, around just over 19. I was at the time.
So you probably would have looked like a school kid anyway.
I did, and that's why they picked me. Yeah, because you look at the other coppers there. Most of them were in obviously in their early 40s or probably 50s, being a small sleepy town as it was.
Yeah.
I was a kid compared to them. So anyway, I stood there, and the school bell rings, and no one sort of come up to me and that sort of stuff. Back in those days, it was a lot easier to stand out front of schools without too many troubles. And the kids come and got their bikes, and I had my badge sort of tucked in. I said, "Hey boys, we want to come and have work here. Get you just to come and stand over here." And I waved the cars, and they come charging down anyway. And long story short, they picked up these two fellas who knocked off the charity shop, and they actually picked them up for about 8 break and enters across the whole area. So so it was, and then
they were high school kids.
They were high school kids, yeah, just young high school kids too, from memory. I think they're only like 14 or something like that from memory. Yeah. But how that got me into UC work was there was a guy from the dog squad that was a part of this little operation that we had. He said, "Oh, you ever thought of undercover work?" I said, "What's that?" And he sort of told me, I thought, sounds pretty cool. So I looked into it a bit more and applied for the course, and did the course the next year, and.
So now I go into a little bit of the course on in my other podcast, on the other series. Just briefly, and you've listened to that, same similar sort of thing, or had mine sort of? Because I think I was a group 2 or 3 after you, wasn't I?
Yeah, well, I was number 3. I think my course was number 3. I think of the course that they had developed. I don't know if they still had numbers for yours when they got to yours.
I can't remember. It was too long ago.
Yeah, it is. The only reason I remember because we got shirts at the time.
So do we. But I that shirt got thrown out long ago. But so it's been 30 years since I did it.
Yeah. So the thing was, it was a 3-week course. It was at a police establishment, but it wasn't. It was a police college, but it wasn't like they used it for officer development and all that sort of stuff. So it wasn't.
So wasn't that the academy?
No. It was Chelmer. I don't think the building's there anymore. Yeah,
no, I don't think it is either.
No. So the thing is, but we did a lot in the local areas and stuff like that as well, out in the public, doing things and stuff like that. And it's funny. There's 2 distinct things I remember from the course. I remember. I think it's the same with yourself. You do a psychological profile before you go in and all that sort of stuff. And they had the psych talk to me at the end of it, and they said, looking at your profile, looks like you're worried about your health. I said, "Oh, yeah, great, yeah, thanks." I didn't at the time. I was 19. I didn't understand what he meant by that. I said, "Yeah, thanks, yeah, cheers." Yeah. A lot older now. I understand what it was about, but the other thing I remember is after my steps, when they said my past and that sort of stuff, and they said 2 things. They said, they're either going to think you're an idiot or a clown. Oh, thanks. Either one works. Yeah.
Did you embrace either of those?
Well, mate, the thing is I try to live that way with people, and as you can see from my outfit, I try and make people smile where I can. And like wearing these outfits, for example, people engage with me. I have no clue who they are. Like, for example, last night, me and my mate were out just at a local brew house. People say, "Oh, I love your outfit, mate. It's awesome." And that's part of the reason I do it. And I think that's gone with me through my life, even though everything I've been through, that external persona of trying to make other people smile, I still try to live to that.
No, and that's fair enough. I guess it was more the fact. So
Yeah.
one of the fellas I went through, who I'm good mates with, or was good mates with, have been out of the job, but we catch up every now and then.
Mm.
Everyone thought he was simple, and so
Yeah.
he
Okay.
played to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's not. He's a very intelligent
Yeah.
fella, but he
Yeah.
played up to that. Okay, so
Yeah.
uh, what was the most difficult part of being in UC for you, and how long did you do it for?
I did the two. I did the 2 years, similar to yourself, because
Yep.
I think that was that they had come to that decision that 2 years was about the right sort of time. There was,
Yeah.
I know of one that had done more time, but he was a bit older and a bit wiser than what I was. Um, but the thing was, the hardest part about it is being who you are, in the sense that you live this life of this other person, you know. And
Yep.
I know you've said in your podcast how you're interested in acting and stuff like that. And I had that. I had a little bit of that when, doing the musicals in high school and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes my life sucked, so I love being someone else. So the hardest part was knowing what you could tell people, when you couldn't. Like when I first got the job in UC, I moved back to Brisbane and moved in with my then girlfriend.
Yep.
Um, and the thing is, it was hard to say, well, what do I tell her? What do I don't tell her? What can I tell my parents? What can I tell my parents? Those sorts of things. That was probably the hardest part.
What
I
did
still
you
play.
tell them?
Yep, sorry. Well, the funny thing is that I didn't tell my parents much to start with, and
Yeah.
that changed. And when we get to that story, I'll explain why that's the case.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, but the thing is, with my girlfriend, I I probably didn't let her in as much as I probably would should, and that was on me. I was only 20 at the time, so I was still young and ignorant, that sort of stuff. And here I am playing with the big boys, sort of thing, and get to be this big cool undercover copper. Growing my hair out, getting a beard. People thinking I was 30. Hey.
Really?
I actually had I had one of my targets say to me, "Oh man, you look about 30." Yeah, thanks, mate. I didn't say how old I really was. Yeah, didn't tell
No,
me how.
but
Yeah,
yeah, no, that's fair enough.
yeah.
Eh, what's a common myth about being an undercover cop, do you think?
The biggest one, I think, and you've touched on it quite a lot, is the glamour. Like there was other guys doing jobs that were down the Gold Coast and stuff like that. And I did get,
Yeah.
I didn't do any jobs myself down that way. But
Me neither, really.
no, yeah, and he Keith, like I've heard Keith's stories a few times, not only in your interview, but in other ways and stuff like that. But I
Yep.
actually did go down because I had a controller that was doing one of my jobs, and he was also controlling one down the coast as well. So every
Yep.
now and again, then I'd go and see him down there, and I was just, and the thing is, even that wasn't glamorous. It's all hard work. Yeah, sure. There's no forms to fill in and stuff like that, but there's so much paperwork. You've got to do your notes,
Yeah.
all that other stuff, that sort of stuff, all the accounting you've got to do. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Every dollar you spend, you still got to account for it and all that sort of stuff. Things you can't get receipts for, but you still got to account for where you spent it.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
old beer coaster. I did this. There you go, in the
yeah,
pocket.
yeah. That's it.
um. Well, so what's something surprising you learnt about yourself doing undercover?
It's fun. I don't know if it's funny or not, but it took me a lot of time to appreciate the skills and talents I learned doing the job. Like when you come out, I haven't got to the part where you've come out yet from your podcast yet, but coming out from covert back into the general police and that sort of stuff, yeah, oh, you're undercover, yeah, big deal. So what? It wasn't until many years later to appreciate the memory exercises that
Yeah.
how good my memory can actually be. Um,
Even
your
after a few drinks.
yeah, even well, yeah, and other things, but um, but the thing is, yeah. So having that memory, your attention to detail, you know, like when you walk into a room, like I know I'm a fireman now, but you're looking at the exits when you walk into a room.
Yep.
It's things like that. But the other big skill I learned, because I dealt with a lot of, I'll say, multicultural people in my undercover days, learning to talk to them, as in, obviously there's a lot of language barriers and stuff like that. So being able to talk to them and be friendly with them and all that sort of stuff. So being able to do that in various situations and stuff like that. But also pressure. You hear about the story in Keith's book about, he had a shotgun sort of held to him,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. And I thought, I was fortunate never to have that situation. But you're going for a job interview, and I think, why am I so stressed about this? I've done all this other stuff. These are people I know, and yeah.
It can put some things into perspective, I guess, in that respect.
Yeah,
It's quite funny talking about coming out, and right, I haven't
yeah,
got there yet, and I
yeah,
don't want to spoil
yeah, of
a
course.
future episode, I guess. When you came out,
Yeah.
did you go straight back into uniform, and was it regional or local?
Well, fortunately, it was sort of local to my local area, in the sense I don't want to mention the station, but
Yeah,
because the boss I had was an absolute twat.
right.
He loved telling a story, but he was absolutely useless to me. Because in my last year of COVID, I was actually saying to the management and that sort of stuff, I'm going to struggle going from doing this job straight back into
Yeah,
uniform, because there was no transition, no nothing. As I used to say, the story was, uh, one day the guys want to have a beer with you, the next day you've had a shave and a haircut, and they want to punch you in the face. Yeah, and that's how
yep,
it was. That's how it was. Like, I had meetings with BCI. It was like the intelligence unit in at headquarters at the
yep,
time. Because
yep.
I did have some technical skills and stuff like that. They did have a position for me, but the thing is, because it wasn't a proper position and hadn't been advertised and all that sort of stuff, my the boss of the boss of Covert said, no, you've got to go back to uniform. You've got to go back. And it was just,
And
yeah,
I think that was one of the things that came out of previous iterations, was that
mm,
you needed to go back into uniform to be a police officer again,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
and they thought that that clean break, and admittedly the process we went through to go back was different. We had psychologists who you had sat down and had a chat
mm,
with, and that sort of stuff. So there was a little bit more than when you went through, but it was still, you finish up this day. I think I
mm,
had a week off, and then bang,
yeah,
in uniform with my hair cut, or
yep,
actually my hair grown, no beard, no nose
mm,
ring, no
yeah,
earring, in a shiny blue uniform that was a size
mm,
too small.
yeah,
Uh, spent far too much time on these things than
yes,
than exercising. Um, and look, rightly or wrongly, when you went through, it wasn't as sophisticated as when I went through, and it still wasn't great.
mm,
Um, and it's only, I think they recognise them. Let's face it. The one thing about police forces is that they're very, very slow at
yeah,
recognising and embracing change.
yeah. I think it's all government departments. I don't think it's just reserved to the
Yeah,
police
no,
department.
you're
Yeah.
probably true. Probably
Mm.
true. How much longer did you stay in the police after you came out of the UC stuff?
Well, I suppose I was fortunate that that station I went to, I had a guy I actually went through the academy with, so he was really great and that sort of stuff. Lovely bloke.
Yep.
So but I was still, because that was when they put the shift roster in and you had to pays and all that sort of stuff. I can't remember the exact terms they were using for it, but I only lasted about 8 months there in that, and then I got a job in the intelligence and training. Um,
Yep.
so, and the thing was, I wasn't big on shift work at the time because I was struggling mentally and that sort of stuff. Not to the extent that happened until much later, but I just needed some routine and that sort of stuff. And obviously, as you know, as a police officer, your roster changes. I was talking to some coppers, their roster doesn't come out. They only know it's 7 or 8 days ahead, sort of thing. Sometimes,
Yeah.
and back then it was about the same for us. So. Um, so I got a job in intelligence and training, and that wasn't too bad because I started to work in technology and stuff like that. I was using computer programs, and it's something I had an itch for. And I got to train people, and I'm good at talking to people and training. So, but the thing was, is that again, the senior sergeant, he then, when he needed someone for like the comms room, because back in those days we did the comms room.
Yeah.
He said, "I need you for the comms room." I thought, really? Anyway, um, uh,
I have to
but
talk to people. Come on.
yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, have to do my job that I'm trained for. Yeah, have to answer the phone.
Yeah.
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 So the thing is, but so from there on, throughout the rest of my career, whilst I was a uniformed officer, I actually never went back into general duties after that. And
Okay, fair enough.
and I lasted another. That was. I've lasted another about 5 years or so, just over 5 years afterwards.
Yeah. I'll come back to that because there's a couple of other things I want to explore about the UC work. What was the most interesting job you did?
Most interesting job. Like the most interesting job I did was as we've established, I was pretty young and that sort of stuff. I even looked young,
Yep.
even with the beard. I looked a bit older, but the thing is, I still didn't have that maturity that some of the other guys did and that sort of stuff, and that was fine. But I was placed into this. So it's a mining town, for lack of a better term, back in the day,
Yep.
and it put me up in a caravan. The informant didn't even live in town anymore. He'd moved out. But the thing is, there was only two people in town who knew who I was. There was my controller who lived in a unit in town, and the detective who arranged the op. Anyway, the informant come in, introduced me to just one of the low level guys in town, who's sort of a bit of a, at the time, a sporting celebrity in the town, who lived in the same, just happened to live in the same caravan park that I did. And and we took the job from there.
Sporting celebrity living in a caravan park. That's okay.
Well, it was the 90s. It's a small town.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the thing is, it was for a marijuana job. So the thing is, the job was to get to the people who were bringing the marijuana into town, and they knew it was coming from the next major city through this one guy, not the guy that I was introduced to. Anyway, they introduced me to this guy, and we hung out, we drank beers, went and watched him play sport and all that sort of stuff. And then I got to meet one of the targets of the operation, who was the sort of the boss in the town, buying off him and that sort of stuff. Even, funny thing is, I was hanging out with couple of the guys and they said, "Oh, let's go have let's go score." I said, "I'll drive." so I drive because I'd been buying off this guy anyway. So I drove around to his place, and they did the deal right in front of me, that sort of stuff. And I just thought, this is fantastic evidence. This is awesome. And anyway, and so the thing is, it was only about a 3 or 4 month op and that sort of stuff. And the last one was, it was not quite a buy bust. It was a large deal. So I think I bought half a pound.
Yeah.
I was trying to. Oh, sorry. That's what I was trying to buy, half a pound. So what I did, I met my guy from the town, and we met the main supplier from the Big Smoke. Anyway, so we met in this car park and all this sort of thing, and we did the barter thing and that sort of stuff. And he said, no, I want this much. I said, fine, this is what I got. Take it or leave it. I said, I'm going to take, an ounce out. Yeah, whatever, mate. This is what I got. Anyway, so they were all picked up the next day and stuff like that. It was hilarious because I listened to just one of your episodes recently where the targets, the guy's being interviewed saying, "Oh, I've never met him, never met Garth at all. Who's he?" So into the interview, "G'day, mate. How you going? Yes, yesterday we did this, and this, and that was it." he just shut up.
It was like,
that.
Okay.
So he had nothing after that. So that was probably the biggest one, was because they followed the guy after we did that deal that afternoon, and he'd taken the money to the local casino, was putting it through there, and so they were able to establish where he was putting the money and all that sort of stuff. So I don't think I was very popular in that town after that. How he was cleaning it. So I don't think I was very popular in that town afterwards, because obviously I stopped the marijuana supply to that whole town. That was probably my biggest and best job. Yeah.
how many jobs did you do?
Well, this is the thing. Since you've asked me to come onto this show, I've been thinking about that, and I've been thinking about it for a few years because I was in there for 2 years, and my memory, as we've discussed on the phone, is my memory is not that great at those times.
Yep.
I remember my very first job, which I want to tell the story of. I've got to tell the story of.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, and I did that job I just mentioned. That was towards the end of my first year. Then the second year, I've just done a few sporadic jobs, and I don't remember the specific details. I remember one I was buying heroin from a Vietnamese person. It was, again, similar to what you say in your podcast. I drive to the car park. I go up and talk to them, and no, they wouldn't give me the money. They wouldn't give me the gear. I'd have to give them money, then follow them in their car, and they'd throw the gear out the window. Then you'd have to pull up and try and find it, and they're throwing it out on the side of the road in front of a school. And just think, really?
Yeah.
And it's a school day. Yeah, and just think, wow. Yeah.
It's amazing how their mind works. All right.
Yes.
So I was going to get you to tell some stories, but we might as well jump in there. But just before we do, one of the things you mentioned was, obviously I use the my alter ego, Michael Bates, or different forms of that. You were saying you didn't have that much of a unique
no, I didn't
covert name.
No, I wasn't very imaginative. And the thing is, this is one of the things surprised me when I first started. If you don't mind me taking a step back a little bit, is that when I first started, we had a barbecue, and the bosses got all the current UCs together and all the new ones coming into the squad, and we have a barbecue and have a chat and that sort of stuff, and then afterwards the boys would say, "Come on, we'll go tell you how it really works," and that was great. That was fantastic because you understood the job a bit more, but I didn't understand. And this is my brain. It didn't understand actually how to do the job itself, as in how do you talk to people, because I remember, I actually do remember one of the jobs I got sent on. I didn't have an informant because the informant had left town, but they wanted me to go to this pub and meet people and talk to people and try and get into the scene and all that sort of stuff. And I have no clue what the frick I'm doing.
Did it work, or did it raise red flags, or?
No, I can't remember how long that job lasted. It didn't last very long, and it didn't sort of go anywhere. I'll be honest, my memory's that bad. I think I made like 2 or 3 buys at the most across the. I think it was like 1, maybe 2 months it lasted at the most. I can't remember exactly, but without any intro, we didn't have any targets to who I was actually targeting, and it was really confusing. So whereas, like me personally, I would have liked to have gone on. I know. I think that the thought at the time was they don't want to expose other coverts to targets. Excuse me. So they keep you separate, sort of thing. So the thing is, but my thing is, how best to learn the job by actually doing it with someone.
Well, and that was sort of something that Keith raised in his stuff, was that was how the training was before they had the course, was that you would go out with someone else and learn the ropes, so to speak. So the job you were talking about, where that you wanted to tell the story about.
Yes. Sorry, I just love this story because
that's okay.
And it goes back to the reason. After this job, I told my parents where I was going, because what happened was I got this job where I was going to an island resort. Okay, so what the management were worried about. It was real hard sell, I can tell you.
All right, we'll leave part 1 of my interview with Garth Kirkwood there. Part 2 is right next door, so make sure you grab that and have a listen and find out about his job on his luxury holiday island. Thank you for joining me on Behind the Thin Blue Line, where I have conversations with current and former police officers and they get to tell their stories. I hope you've enjoyed that episode. In the next episode, we'll again explore the human side of policing through more conversations with police officers from around the world. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Lastly, if you're a current or former police officer, I would love to chat to you about your experiences, or if you're feeling dangerous, tell your stories on my podcast. Please get in contact by my email, which is whisperintheshadowspodcast@gmail.com. I look forward to you joining me next week.